Welcome back, Principal Matters podcast listeners. I am Dr. Jen Schwanke, and
Will Parker. And here we are, Jen.
Here we are. And we have quite an episode for you today. I interviewed Jamie Meade, who is doing a lot of work on the importance of hope and the science of hope. And I think this is a critical conversation for our principals to hear because, there's a lot of despair and anxiety and stress in this job. So we're going to talk about the other side of that coin today with hope. But we're going to open with the Q&A today. Will, I was just telling you before we started recording that we heard from a longtime listener. She said, I have a question. I want to know what you think the difference is between systems and procedures, which I thought was a great question. And I told her I'm going to write about this on my newsletter soon. I'm going to really put some thought into it. But, you and I are constantly talking about the importance of systems. And so I think this is a fair question because I think a lot of people confuse systems and procedures. We do use those terms interchangeably. So I've done some thinking about it. I have a head start on you, but do you want to tell us what first came to mind when I asked this question?
No, I'm going to pass the ball to you, Jen, because you've been chewing on it. And
right.
I've got some thoughts too, but I want you to go first.
So, I love analogies. I think of it like an IKEA dresser. The dresser is the system. It is a structure that we use to store and organize things so they don't end up all over our bedroom floor. The procedure is the set of directions that we have to follow to get that IKEA dresser put together. So in other words, the system is the structure, the why and the what, and the procedure is the how. How are we going to do it? So it's a list. And also the procedures can be a subset of the larger system. So it can be, here's how we're going to do this part of the thing step by step so that the system works. And then there might be another step-by-step procedure. There might be multiple in action steps that build the system.
Wow, that's a cool analogy. Here's what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say the dresser is the system. It's the structure in which we have created a piece of furniture that needs to be necessary for us to be able to organize and use the things we own. The procedure is how do we use the dresser? Like how do we fold the things that go in it, or what did we decide goes in each drawer? And so you could apply that analogy in more than one way.
Right.
And so that's really great. So systems. It is hard to separate systems from processes and procedures, but processes and procedures can also be different things too. But I just think that when I think about systems with leaders, I like to ask them questions like, you can have a running list. What are your procedures? Wow, Jen, I'm having a hard time separating because what I want to say is, okay, what are your systems or procedures for starting the beginning of the day with all students? For how you do exits or parent pickup, or how you manage multiple lunch times.
So as you're talking about this, Will, I see your brain moving into the delineation between the two. And I think you're right. I think the system is many times a larger overriding approach to something. A good analogy for me is safety, school safety. Your overall system is, we're going to keep this school safe. And so we have software platforms for safety plans. We have local law enforcement partnerships and policies based on safety. That's our system. But the procedures, there are 50, maybe 100 different procedures. One is, say, fire drills. This single step-by-step instructions within the system that dictates how are we going to clear the hallway? How are we going to take attendance? How are we going to let kids know that they can come back in? And then there's also a system for how we handle SROs in our schools, and a procedure for that. And then there's a procedure for how we're going to communicate to our community about our safety approaches. So multiple procedures make up a system.
No, that's so good. Thank you for saying that. So whether it's attendance or instruction or personnel, there's always going to be a system needed so that we all know the structure that's in place for that outcome to be accomplished. But then within that system are going to be procedures that delineate like you said, with safety between tornado drills or fire drills or intruder drills or reaching out to our fire marshal to come visit our school. All these pieces we have that happen within that too, Jen. Wow. What
And
a great question. Thank you, listener, whoever, I know
yeah,
someone sent that to you in advance, and I know
right,
our Q&A is only 5 minutes. We could probably keep going
right.
on this. You're making me want to read what you're going to write.
Well, here's why it's important that we talk about it, because if something is failing, I think sometimes we blame the system
Mhm.
when all we need is a tweak to the procedures, or vice versa. We might say our procedures are great, everybody's following them and everybody knows it, but they don't understand how it fits into the larger system. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a distinction that's worth making when you're trying to solve a problem or make something better.
Okay, and I'll give you an application. I know we're going over on our 5 minutes, but, like, I had a principal reach out to me recently, and he's like, "Will, do you know someone that does really good PD? Because I want we have this need. We have students that are having a hard time regulating emotion, they melting down, all these things that are happening in the elementary level. And I've had people come in that help us understand the system, the mindset, all the things necessary, but I need somebody to come in and teach some procedures. Like,
Mhm.
give me some nitty-gritty tactical procedures that people can follow that then result in some kind of help or regulation or commitment, refocus. And I was like, oh yeah, I see the difference. And I actually know someone. So if anyone else is listening to this and you're like, I want that person, then just email me. I'll point you to some of my friends that do that kind of work too. But thank you, Jen. What a great
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, perfect.
Well, I know the Principal Matters listeners are going to love this conversation that you got to host the interview
Mhm.
for. And if anyone wants to stay connected with you over the summer, Jen, how can they find you?
Yep, they can find me at my website, jenschwanke.com, or subscribe to my newsletter. It's called Principal Problems, and they can do that on my website too. So just find
And
me at jenschwanke.com.
yeah, and you can find all of today's resources at williamdparker.com. And Jen, we have in our small team, Aaron Fulbright manages our website, and he's also been able to grab the web address principalmatterspodcast.com. So if sometimes you forget Jen, Will, our names, whatever, just go to principalmatterspodcast.com and you'll find all the resources there too. It'll just take you straight back to the website. So Jen, thank you. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for listening. And until next time, we hope you are having a great summer, and thanks for doing what matters. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Everyone talks about the power of data-driven instruction, but what does that actually look like? Look no further than iExcel, the ultimate online learning and teaching platform for K-12. iExcel gives you meaningful insights that drive real progress, and research can prove it. Studies in nearly all 50 states across the U.S. show that schools that use iExcel outperform other schools on state tests. Educators who use iExcel love that they can easily see how their schools are performing in real time to make better instructional decisions. And iExcel doesn't stop at just data. iExcel also brings an entire ecosystem of resources for your teachers with a complete curriculum, personalized learning plans, and so much more. It's no wonder that iExcel is used in 95 of the top 100 school districts. Ready to join them? Visit iexcel.com/PM to get started. Support for Principal Matters comes from DigiCoach and its walk-through tool. I want you to picture walking through classrooms, observing teachers and students. In just 10 minutes, you'd hope to see good instructional strategies and student learning taking place. Or maybe you have questions about something missing from instruction or planning. Instead of taking 30 minutes to write a follow-up email or leaving your teacher unsupported, wouldn't it be great to have an app on your phone or tablet where you could send immediate feedback while also collecting data? Enter DigiCoach, a customizable walkthrough and coaching tool created by school leaders for school leaders with thousands of pre-written research-based commendations and coaching tips, empowering you to provide quick, actionable feedback. DigiCoach is not an evaluation tool. Instead, it's an easy-to-use feedback and coaching tool, an efficient way to store your notes and collect data for improving student outcomes right in your hands. It can be used on iPhone, Android, or tablets and includes speech-to-text functions. Make the most of your walkthroughs with a tool that saves you time and enhances meaningful feedback to your teachers. Go to digicoach.com to learn more, and please tell them Principal Matters recommended you check them out. That's digicoach.com.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Principal Matters Podcast. If you have spent any time in leadership circles, you have likely heard the phrase, hope is not a strategy. This is usually said, as you know, to signal toughness or pragmatism. But today we're going to challenge that notion entirely. We're going to talk about why hope isn't just a strategy, it's a biological and psychological necessity for our schools to thrive. I have an awesome guest today, guys. I am so honored to be joined by my friend and my colleague, Jamie Meade. Jamie's got an incredible career. She has, for 35 years, been a dedicated champion for educational excellence, whose journey began as a high school English teacher in rural Appalachia, which I want to talk a little bit more about. Her extensive leadership experience includes pivotal roles in curriculum and assessment, service with the Ohio Department of Education, and vice president at Battelle for Kids, where she collaborated with Gallup to develop essential student voice instruments. She is a preeminent voice on the science of hope, having spent over a decade researching how hope serves as a measurable driver of academic achievement and well-being. Today, she travels the nation and abroad, as I just learned as we were talking offline, as a sought-after speaker and consultant, translating complex neuroscience into practical, hope-filled strategies that empower students, staff, and communities. So we need hope these days, Jamie. And I reached out to you after Will and I did a podcast. We were talking about hope, and I said, I need to get Jamie on this podcast. So welcome, Jamie. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure. It's so great to be here. Thanks for thinking of me. It's wonderful to be here and just chat a little bit about some learnings in the science of hope. So thank you.
Exactly. No problem. And, you and I worked together years ago. You were, you oversaw all the data and assessment in the district where I still work. And so, you have shifted roles, but really I know that the root of it for you is students and growth. And this shift into really being a hope expert is fascinating to me. I heard you, Jamie, I don't know if you remember this, you were asked to speak about hope for a conference for female superintendents and female leaders, and you wowed them. They needed that message, which is why we're here today.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen.
Okay, Jamie, we're going to just dig right in. I want to talk about this phrase that we hear so often, especially in education and in educational leadership. Hope is not a strategy, but you kind of argue the opposite a little bit. How do you define real hope in a way that distinguishes it from optimism or wishful thinking?
Yep. It's a barrier in trying to actually help people understand the science of hope. That phrase, hope is not a strategy. That's a fair statement 30 years ago, prior to this science of hope. And we have to catch up a little bit with the science. So I think what people really mean is when we use hope synonymously with wishful thinking, like, I hope it doesn't rain today. Fair enough. Mm-hmm. That is not a strategy. But when we pivot to the real science of hope, going all the way back, and that's why I mentioned 30 years ago, to the father of hope theory, a gentleman by the name of C.R. Snyder. So if you're going to do your own research on the science of hope, you probably wouldn't get past page 1 of your Google search without coming up with C.R. Snyder's name. And he was one of the first researchers who started looking in behavioral science. And he was asking this question about, what are people doing as far as how they think about the future, how they take action on their goals, what's sitting in that motivational spirit? And so he came up with a helpful framework that I want to introduce here, because we'll revisit this in our conversation. But his research led him to create this framework, what we called the hope theory 30 years ago. Today it's science, and proven science that he was onto something. He says that, first of all, people who have hope to the degree that it changes their life satisfaction, they first of all have goals, meaning there's something out there beyond today, beyond my present self, that I'm looking forward to in the future. So much so that what I'm looking forward to excites me, it matters to me, and it motivates me inside. So there's something I'm looking forward to, a goal. And some hope researchers refer to that as this belief that my future is going to be better than today. So if we stopped right there, Jen, hope wouldn't be different than wishful thinking because just having a goal, right? So
Right.
the other two pieces of C.R. Snyder's framework is what some hope scientists refer to the tools of hope that help you get to that goal. And so the first one would be, I don't just have a goal, but I actually can see a pathway, a path between my present self into that helps me navigate my way to this future aspiration or this future goal, something I want. In other words, I see a way forward. And I love that C.R. Snyder called it a path, especially today, because think about what that evokes for you when you think about a path versus a 4-lane superhighway. It sends a different message to you, right? Like if you're going after that goal, you better be rugged. You better have the right equipment with you. You better be resilient because, there's some logs and some tree limbs and some things you might trip on and stumble. And there might be days where can't even see the path, right? So I have a goal, I have a pathway. And the third component part of this is agency. So goals, pathways, agency. And agency, we'll revisit that later in the conversation, but not wholly unlike what we talk about with learner agency. This is the belief in me and my ability to navigate that path. What's the story I tell myself about my ability to navigate the path? So that framework will serve us throughout this conversation today. So if you think about goal, pathway, agency, we love acronyms in education, don't we? Think about that acronym. GPA. And so when I stumbled onto that, I thought, oh, this is another GPA that deserves a whole lot more attention. So I'll just let that sit right there and we'll revisit that framework.
Right. Well, I'm glad for the framework. Here's why. I'm having the same reaction talking to you right now as I did in that conference room when I heard you talking to those female leaders, because then and now it feels like that framework is a plan, right? It feels like it's not just get up every day. I'm a school principal. I get up every day and I go to my work and I wait for things to happen to me and I react to those things. It is much more deliberate and thoughtful, really, when you think about hope. And one of the fascinating things that you fold into your work with hope is neuroscience. You said that our understanding of hope has evolved rapidly alongside brain science, which is also evolving rapidly. So, what is something that we know today about the hoping brain that we didn't know perhaps 30 years ago?
Yeah. So C.R. Snyder's foundational work, that goals, pathways, agency, was the beginning. And that was enough to tell us that hope is actually a skill that we can learn, and it's a mindset. And so C.R. Snyder set that foundation. Neuroscience comes in, and there's so much we could talk about, but I'm going to stick to what's the one big thing that gave me the most hope about studying hope and spreading this message of hope. And it's this: brain science, neuroscience tells us that we actually, you ready for it? We actually choose hope. Now, we choose hope. That's pretty empowering, right? You mean I'm not stuck here? You mean I don't have to be stuck in this place of hopelessness? We actually choose it. And brain science tells us this, that the more we choose it, the more we build our capacity to be hopeful. That's neuroplasticity. In other words, change the way you think, and the brain you think with will change. And that's so empowering to me and beautiful that we were actually wired that way. We were created that way, that our human brains are created to actually have capacity to be hopeful, to think about tomorrow and be hopeful and to motivate. So I love that aspect of neuroscience. And we'll leave it right there. Just enough to make people have an introduction that makes you curious about it.
Make them keep listening, Jamie. This is so good. And this is not on my list of questions, but you and I both come from very, very rural backgrounds. And I think about hope. My dad is still a farmer. There are professions where hope, I believe, is critical. Farming is one. You've got to believe the rain's going to come, the crop's going to be okay. You have to. And education is like that too. It's a requirement, really. And I think about our listeners, our school principals, aspiring principals, and so on. And I think about how we've kind of hit them over the head with the need for data, right? And you have been a data expert for many years. Nobody knows data like Jamie Meade does. So tell me what your research says about that link between hope and hard metrics like staff
Yeah.
retention, graduation rates, student attendance, and how leadership kind of folds into that whole conversation as well.
Yep. So I have a feeling we're speaking, there's an audience here that shows up for a podcast that's hungry for information, right? And so that's the people who are listening to this podcast. And that was for me, I was really hungry for information, and that's where data led me. I was on this quest, not for my love of numbers, but for my love of impact. And this will really resonate for people today, but this preservation of my energy. Where do I put my energy where I get the greatest impact? Because, I'm pretty tired here. I'm an English teacher. I'm grading papers all evening, right? I'm trying to raise a family. So that was my pathway to data. And I would tell you that I was the person, and Jen, you can speak to this, and probably anybody listening to this who's worked with me in the state of Ohio, that I was the person who could alphabetize your test scores by its mother's maiden name and align it to the third grade reading standards with a vertical progression to number 7 on the ACT. That's how deep in the weeds I could go with your data. In the name of let's pick up these rocks and look under them and see what levers we need to move to better serve children in their academic achievement and growth. And that same hunger stopped me on a dime when somebody put this data in front of me. And originally it was put in front of me from the Gallup organization. And it was a research article, peer-reviewed, scientific, research-based article when I'm up to my ears in Excel spreadsheets and data that simply said, your level of hopefulness and how you hope for the future is a greater predictor of your future success than your grade point average, than your test scores. And it just stopped me, because I'm like, wait, what?
You're like, darn it.
But you know what? As a former English teacher, it just didn't surprise me. I was just excited that how do they know that? How do they know that? Where's that science? And I started following that breadcrumb trail because I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't know anything about hope. I thought hope was not a strategy. I thought hope was wishful thinking. And I just followed where that trail led because it was a void in my career. And it was something I suspected a lot of educators didn't know a lot about. And I thought, if that is true, I'm going to hunt that down. I'm going to go deep in this work. I'm going to take deep work and I'm going to follow that breadcrumb trail because if that is true, we're not talking about it in education and we should be.
Right.
If that is the greater. And so today, what we know, because thousands of studies today, peer-reviewed scientific articles tell us that the hope correlates to not just your academic achievement, not just your academic progress, correlates to that. The greater the hope, the more likely the kid is to come to school, the more likely, the greater the hope, graduation rates. Hope is the actually indicator that drives our motivation and our energy and our fuel that makes all those other things happen in our life. In other words, hope is how we show up when it gets hard. And so pretty exciting, positive correlations, and not just to school and academic and our work, but to our well-being, to our health, our mortality. So pretty powerful.
Well, and let me circle around to what you said earlier. Hope is a mindset and hope is a skill. And so we can hone those just like we hone our algebraic equations or, our study of rocks or whatever it is we're doing. We can hone those. Yeah. I want to go back to something that you said. You said, I was an English teacher. I'm grading papers all night. I'm raising some kids. I'm tired. And I think many of our teachers and leaders could really connect with that thought. I'm tired. So how have you found, Jamie, that cultivating hope can serve as a tool for restoring energy and motivation rather than being one more thing? Because I just said hope is a skill and a mindset. And so I don't want anybody thinking they have homework, right? One more thing to do on an already full plate to go home and practice that hope. So how can it restore energy?
Yeah. So, first, let me just say that the idea behind hope being a skill and a mindset is like any skill, and teachers know something about teaching skills. And so, teachers know. Ask your PE teachers, ask your music teachers, anybody who's teaching a skill. Your English teachers. Skills require practice. And that means I'm not just going to wake up today and be hopeful, is I have to be committed to practice. And how do we practice? How do we practice that? It's from doing hard things. That's how I get the practice at it. That builds my resilience. So we can revisit more of that later. But one of the things that I think about this idea of exhaustion is, let's follow this breadcrumb trail to goals, pathways, and agency being the big indicator of my energy. And agency is kind of like fuel in the car. And the thing about my agency, my belief in myself, is I can deplete that. I can absolutely deplete my energy to the point of exhaustion. And so that's part of this kind of little breadcrumb trail we can pull to understand what's going on here. But probably the best way I could illustrate that is to build our awareness of what happens to us when we lose hope. And it's one of the most insightful things I learned being an educator. It's one of those things I wish people would have pulled me aside and, pre-teaching. I think it's something everybody needs to know before they step foot into a school to help work with kids or colleagues, is what does hopelessness look like? So we've already established that hope is not an emotion. It's a skill and a mindset, a goal, path, and agency. But when we lose hope, we can feel some pretty intense emotions. And this also comes to us from the field of neuroscience and positive psychology. So it really stunned me when I learned, what's the first emotion, the most powerful emotion you are most likely to feel when you first lose hope? Now let's overlay our framework. There's something I want. There's a goal. And I'm on this pathway, right? I'm in my career. I'm a first-year principal. And all of a sudden there's a barrier on my path, right? Or this day isn't going the way I thought it was going to go. This path is unwinding in an unexpected way. Or you know what? I can't even see the path. Or I lost funding for the path. You
Right.
name it, right? I'm on the path and all of a sudden I'm stuck. And the skills we have to reroute, to find an alternative path to that goal, that's what we're talking about. Skills to navigate the path, the resilience I have, the mindset. But the first emotion we are most likely to feel when we get stuck on that path, most of your listeners are on the receiving end of this on a daily basis. And I can say it in a ballroom of principals and they'll call it out. What's the emotion you're on the receiving end of a lot of times of the day? It's surprising. It's anger. I'm mad about that. I'm mad about that. And so when I get stuck on the path, anger wells up because there's something I want and I feel blocked off. So imagine this downward spiral, and I'll keep this brief, but this downward spiral, anger requires energy. And so I still want the goal. I'm expending my energy because I'm angry, and I can fall a step lower in pursuit of my goal. I can fall down this spiral staircase into sadness and despair. Right there, Hope Science tells us when I get in sadness and despair, I am more likely to be more empathetic than I am when I'm angry. I fall a step lower. That's a pivotal moment where we tend to reach out to community. We might be more empathetic to someone else's journey. We might lend a helping hand and actually ask for help to get back up the spiral staircase to a place of hope. But the very bottom of that staircase, when we fall all the way down that spiral staircase into a place of deep hopelessness, that final emotion is pretty interesting. It's when we get to the, you know what? I don't care anymore. I'm no longer expending any energy because I don't think it matters. I don't think I can make a difference. See, my agency is depleted. I don't think that me taking a move on this chessboard is going to matter. So now I'm exhausted. So I say all of that, Jen, because as a leader, having the discernment between genuine exhaustion, yeah, this person's tired, they're sleep deprived. Brain science tells us don't trust your sleep deprived brain. So what's called for in the moment of leadership is discernment around, are we inactive or sitting in apathy because we truly are exhausted, we need a break? Or do we need to get in motion? Because guess what? Either way, you don't change your circumstances when we sit in apathy. We don't. So, we even have a word for that in our society today, right? Quiet quitting. That's not a strategy. So
Right.
hope science says you got to get in motion to change your circumstances to get back up the spiral to a hopeful place.
One of the most powerful things I heard you say when I first heard you talk about hope, and we're going to talk about students in a minute, but you said to us, what does apathy look like in a student?
Mhm.
And you said it looks like laziness. And how many times have we said that student is so lazy? And
Yeah,
I mean, it stopped me in my tracks. I have
me
not
too.
since never described
Yeah.
probably anyone as lazy because it's apathy, which is down the spiral staircase. I think that's a really critical point for
I
us to
said
think
that
about.
months ago to you, Jen, if not a year ago, and it
Right.
stuck with me too. And I think it resonates with educators because hopelessness, don't misdiagnose hopelessness as they're just lazy or they're just disengaged. That's why. And so the bigger question here is, might it be hopelessness? Because
Right.
the good news is we can learn hope. We can learn hope, and I can change that situation. I can't change lazy, right? I don't know what to do. I don't know what strategy is there. So
Right.
it's a question worth asking. It stuck with me too.
Right. You mentioned a few sentences back the word resilience, and we know that this is very critical right now for our leaders. When things get hard, and in school leadership, they always do. That's just Tuesday, right? It's just hard. How does a hope mindset change the way a leader might handle a crisis compared
Mhm.
to a traditional management mindset?
Yeah, it's a great question,
Hmm.
and one that I think Hope Science has a lot to reveal about that. First of all, a commonly misunderstood is hope does not deny the situation. Hope is not toxic positivity. Hope is not naive optimism. Hope boldly faces the current circumstance. So that's first. Um, People who lead with hope and people who don't both face tough, critical days in their career. They have crisis along the way. So it's how they respond that is the difference. I would also tell you that in the spirit of resilience and opportunities to practice building your hope. The big statement about hope science and research that was a head scratcher for me is we have to expect it to be hard. When you expect it to be hard, your brain settles on a different level of preparation. So when you're working with a first year principal, when you are mentoring them, there is something about how your brain responds to a challenge. When you think, oh, this is going to be easy sailing, I've got this. I had a great teaching experience, and I'm going to nail this first year as because then when you encounter a problem, it knocks you back. And so, yeah, you think it was like not, people probably didn't realize we'll quote Mike Tyson here, but we will. Um, Mike Tyson says everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? So it's
Right.
not enough. Not enough. So that's where that resilience and the grittiness comes. And there's something about expect it to be hard. So that was something I learned in teaching. It's not enough just to ask kids what their goals are. You got to plant another seed. So the next question that follows that is it's not what do you want to be when you grow up? That's don't leave that hanging. That's not a strategy. The second part of that question is, and how will you respond when it doesn't go the way you think it's going to go? It's a great question. It's a great interview question. They're first year principal. How will you respond when this plan you've put in front of me doesn't go the way you think it's going to go? Because it's not being skeptical. And hope researchers say hope is the one positive psychology that requires just a note of skepticism to prepare you with an armor of when things go wrong, and they will. You are ready to keep a calm brain, so your brain is functioning differently here. It's like, okay, that you're ready to forge a different pathway forward, or you have a different level of resilience. And sometimes, Jen, and you know this, you and I are looking face to face probably a decade after we first worked together, and we both have a lot of different experiences under our belt. That's the wisdom of experience, because once you have experience, and all those principals out there who led us this country through the COVID pandemic, you were all pioneers. And you probably see your job very differently now. Like, yeah, it can go wrong. We probably shed some naive optimism, like we all have a different level of resilience. And so I would say this as well. And this is the one that, just as a parent, hear this: entitlement is a hope killer. The mindset of entitlement is a hope killer. Hope does not discriminate between people with high privilege and wealth and people who grow up in a very different circumstances, because it is the mindset that I have to work hard for this. I have to be resilient if I'm going to get to that goal. I have to be ready to overcome challenges and obstacles. And when our mindset is such that this is going to be easy going, I've got this, it kills our readiness to respond with grit and resilience, because I don't think I have to work hard if I'm approaching this with entitlement. I'll just sit here inactive and goodness will radiate around me, right? That's my mindset. And so it's really interesting to think about it that way. That's why rigor in the classroom is one of the best things you can do to build agency for students.
Right. My mom listened to this podcast once. She told me to stop interrupting people and saying, yeah, yeah. But I keep wanting to do that. I keep wanting to say, preach. Yes. Amen.
Feedback, Mom. I love it, though. It feels like a conversation. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks, Mom. But this is really hard to do with Jamie Meade. She's saying really smart things. One of the things I want to highlight a little about what you just said is, that's a great interview question. And I'm thinking about this in terms of hiring or building a staff and that culture you have with your staff, because the principal cannot be the only hope holder.
Nope.
Because they'll probably be accused of toxic positivity or whatever. But you have mentioned before that schools already have hope builders in the building. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that, shall we? How can a principal identify these people, and what do their practices look like? And what can we do with those hope builders?
Yeah. Well, I am a deep believer that educators, people who are drawn to this profession, who signs up for this, right? It's people who care about the future for kids. That's who signs up for this. They care about the future. They care about kids. And I am just a believer in that's who's here. And hope builders are among us. Now, some of us may be feeling moments of hopelessness or exhaustion, like you said. But I think hope builders are among us, and the leader's job is to have a trained eye. I love what you said when we talked about goals, pathways, agency. Have a trained eye to know what that looks like, because that's what you want to replicate. That's what you want to pay attention to. So when we talked about that hopeless spiral, that's a loss of energy. When we lose hope, we're draining the energy. So hope is a lot about paying attention to hope builders. And anybody listening to this podcast right now, when I talk about what this looks like, even aside from if you're not measuring hope, and there are measures out there, but if you just wanted to do an observational look for or feel for in your school, this is people who bring energy and excitement. I would ask you this: who gets kids excited for the future? Who's getting kids excited for the future? Not just excited to learn English, but excited to get out of bed and come to school, because I see school as a place that helps me build a better future for myself. So the teachers who have that connection, who are the agency builders? And I would say this, agency builders, people who share their power for the greater good, share their power in the classroom to build the empowerment of students. So this is that shared voice and choice we talk about. This is where, I'm not just the sage on the stage, but I am sharing the empowerment I have as a classroom teacher to make you feel your power as a student. What a great gift, right? So these are agency builders for kids. These are people that believe. And I want to say something about this that's not obvious, but something the research bears out. When it comes to agency, people with high agency and high hope, they don't go it alone. So sometimes agency can be equated with autonomy. And certainly the feeling of autonomy and freedom of choice is key to agency. But don't mistake this. Sometimes we can send signals to kids that agency and is doing it by yourself. And look what I did by myself is, quote, smart. So I would say be careful what you label as smart, because agency is about your resources. So when you think about high hope people are paying attention to my fuel, right? And not depleting my fuel to the point of exhaustion, but understand they just ask different questions in that crisis. Remember the crisis of the school leader, the student. High agency people ask questions. What resources do I need? And who can help me? And they're not afraid to ask for help. So this idea that you and I were probably raised on of pull up your bootstraps, right? Figure this out on your own because you're tough. There's a time and place for that. Fair enough. But also is teach kids when you need help, when you get stuck, you are not alone. So back to your original question, what do these teachers look like? They cultivate a strong sense of belonging in that classroom. In other words, the degree to which there is high trust that if I get stuck, there's somebody in this classroom that will help me. And that might be you, the teacher, that might be my friends, my classmates, but there is community. So you can take that and stack that all the way up to the organizational level. When I get stuck, there is someone here in this place who will help me. And teachers who cultivate that in the classroom through their classroom management strategies, through how they cultivate friendships, so powerful in building hope. So hope and belonging are unique constructs, but they go hand in hand. They are reciprocal. When belonging drops, or I feel like I matter here, so will hope. When hope drops, so does belonging. They're interdependent.
So that leads me, I was going to ask you about student agency and teaching students how to hope.
Yeah.
But this all ties together, right? Because
Yes.
that sense of belonging and
Yes.
learning how to hope,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of uncertainty when you're a kid, a lot of it.
Right.
And so I wonder how we can teach students to hope and
Yeah.
how that ties into their agency. Talk to me a little bit about that. I feel like I'm almost there.
Yeah. Well, here's one of the big moves we can make today that we weren't talking about when I first started teaching. We didn't know it. The science wasn't here. So in defense of everybody who's learning this for the first time, hope is a fairly new strategy. We didn't know these things. And so you're probably hearing threads of positive psychology, motivation, student engagement, things you've read in other places. And a lot of this is the same science. When it comes to teaching kids to hope, I would say that the researchers today in this space go back to C.R. Snyder's Goals, Pathways, Agency. Research today in hope science would tell us, in brain science, there's some prerequisites. Before you can be really good at getting excited for your future, carving this pathway, being resilient, having agency along it, some of that prerequisite is making sure that there's some foundational pillars of strong mental health and wellness. And that means we talk about, paying attention to those indicators, the prerequisites, those pillars of good sleep, or just our overall well-being. And so paying attention, one of the things we can do differently in schools is making sure that kids know how their brains are created and what's happening in the human brain. And here's what I mean by that. When you start studying brain science, you understand pretty quickly that the brain's first job is to keep you safe. Now, if you go into a room of teachers and you say, what do you think the first job of the human brain is? Most of us, our instincts is we want to say, oh, it's to learn my classroom. It's to learn the lesson plan I just worked on so hard. That's what I want the brain's first job to be. And I'm going to tell you, when I first stepped into the classroom 35 years ago, I want you to show up ready to learn. Because that's what we're here to do, to get down to business, right? I worked hard on this lesson plan. What we know today is that the brain's first job is to keep you safe. And that means every child who walks into my classroom with a human brain, every human I interact with at school, my colleagues, parents, every human brain's first job is to keep you safe. That means that I'm scanning this environment for who or what might hurt me here. Who or what might hurt me here. And if I'm feeling it, whether it's real or perceived, if I am feeling harm, my brain functions differently. That means that my amygdala, or the region of the brain, that network of the brain that's trying to keep me safe, is staying on high alert. And we see that today in brain scans. You see brains light up in fear. And so hope is not about this toxic positivity, but hope comes in to balance us. And hope says that, yeah, it's healthy to fear some things in life to keep you safe. That's why the human species is alive. But you got to keep that in check. And so what I mean by we choose hope is the automated brain first response is going to be fear or what might hurt me here, right? And unchecked, that can become pretty irrational, especially if there's pain in my past that you remind me of, teacher, right? Or you're making me feel that way. You're not doing anything wrong per se, but I'm just feeling unsafe here, right? So this brain science has so much to teach us about being aware of the automatic brain response is to look for what might hurt you. And that's where we choose hope and make an assessment, rational, irrational. I mean, this is a continuum. There's definitely space here for clinical help. But in this tier 1 intervention for all students and everybody we interact with is understanding I can choose a different thought. Right. I can choose a different thought in this moment. So hope brings us back to the center and says, yeah, there's hard stuff, but I can choose a different thought to not fall into the habit of a rumination loop. So big gateway to hope and agency is paying attention to how your brain works. And that's empowering for kids to know that.
Well, and I'm thinking about what you said earlier about the spiral. And if a kid gets angry, right? A kid gets angry is, and I think we've made huge gains in how we respond to a kid who's angry. We really have. 30 years ago, when I first started teaching, even an angry kid was a suspended kid. But I think if we remember that's a loss of hope, and we remember that agency and belonging and trauma and stories and that trigger of fear might manifest itself in anger. Wow, that kind of takes a lot of pressure off of the adults in helping a child navigate that. And then that makes me think about the adults, right? How can a school leader or a building district leader use this science of hope to re-engage a staff? I'm thinking about the current state of education, funding, student enrollment, all the things, right? Anyone who's feeling disillusioned, how can we use this science of hope to re-engage our staff or to keep them going without sounding out of touch or toxic?
Yeah. So I would say first, just to underscore what we just talked about, that not all anger is because of a loss of hope. But when we see anger manifest itself in our schools, it's a question worth asking. Might this anger be because of a loss of hope? And so for me, when I first started studying hope, it was it changed me. It changed me first. It changed my response to anger. So instead of being defensive, I now have a toolkit. And I think sometimes, if we're on the receiving end of anger and we don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, that can make me feel hopeless. I don't have the tools to navigate this current environment. So what hope does is it gives us a toolkit of, wait a minute, now I'm thinking, might there be a goal that's missing? And so that's a great question to ask. This is a great precursor is, what are you looking forward to? What are you looking forward to? And ask a kid that, ask an adult that, it's a great question to ask kids on a Friday, is to make sure you're planting seeds to give kids something to look forward to come back to school on Monday. If you don't have an answer to that question, get one, right? Something you're looking forward to. That's first. That's the goal part of it. Something that matters to you. So in changing the culture, I would say as a principal, as a leader, as a district leader, anybody listening to this, start with your own curiosity about this and take a deep dive into this and ask yourself this. How am I doing on my own hope for the future? Do I believe the future state will be better than the present? Do I believe that? That's a great place to start. So start there. And the second one I would say is to understand that hope is situational. And so you're going to have some hard days, right? And you got to give yourself permission to sit with that. And that's the power of colleagues and colleagues who can help you through those days. That's why we don't go it alone. Hope is situational. And one of the things that I've learned is it's situational. It's dependent upon these four things: the people around you, as a principal. And if we could see the audience listening to this, they're all going to shake their heads together in unison when I say this, because every time I just go out and I say this in any ballroom or any conference or any back to school convocation, you can hear the murmur in the room. Low hope people who are down on their hope, tend to hang out together. They hang out together. They will seek together. And so that's the one that nobody's surprised by that statement. And I always have to say, don't look around. Don't look around. It's because we don't get pushed out of our comfort zone. I can sit in this space with it. And hope is active. It's not passive. So when we sit with people who let us sit in our hopelessness, and there's nobody to borrow hope from, we sit there and we don't change our circumstances. So you got to expand your social circle. So the 4 P's: the people you're with. The second P is the power. How do they use their power, their empowerment? Who's holding the power, and are they sharing it to make the greater good, or is it for my good? So how are you using your power? That's the teacher in the classroom, the agency, building student voice, listening to other people, hearing your perspective, making people feel their empowerment, and not just feel it, but genuinely, authentically have empowerment to change the circumstance of the collective situation. People, the power, the place. That's culture, right? How this feels here. Is this predictable? This is how it always goes here. That's how that feels. The classroom, that's all of your cultural routines and the way things are. And then the fourth one is a pretty powerful one. It's purpose. And those things make our hope situational. So do we have a shared purpose here? Are you here for the kids? Because I'm here for the kids, right? And so if we feel that in our culture, that can build hope when we have that shared purpose. And that's why when the hope is low in the culture, the research says start with we goals, not me goals. Start with the we, the collective us, and you can start to build hope. That's a lot, Jen. That was a long answer to probably something.
Well, no, I want to go back to a word you just said. You said borrow hope. And this is beautiful because of your 4 P's we're rounding 3 and coming home. And I want you to tell our audience one of the things that I heard you say years ago, and it's so powerful. I have never forgotten it.
Yeah.
And that is about this ability to borrow hope. I could quote you because I have countless times, but I want you to say it. How does that work, borrowing hope?
Yep. It was one of the things that stopped me, and it's one of the reasons why I do this work today, because I didn't know that. So low hope people in our lives, and those low hope students who walk through, our school doors, who step foot onto our school buses, who step foot into our classes, and everybody on this podcast can think of somebody. Low hope people can borrow hope. So low hope students can borrow hope from their teachers, but here's the caveat, but only if you have it to spare. So, do I have enough hope? This energy that I bring to life, do I have enough hope that when people are around me, they feel that? They feel that hope within me and they borrow it. And what that looks like in the classroom is being strategic and intentional about how we come together in community. And that's why low hope people sitting together, there's nobody to borrow hope from. So being strategic and intentional, we got to mix this up because these people need something to believe in. And is there somebody here that's navigating a path forward through their story, their life lessons? They've overcome some hard stuff. They've walked this path before. Students borrow hope from one another. Strategic grouping. I may not believe, my agency may not be there, that I believe I can get this project done, but this kid sitting beside of me, he's on fire. He's like going after it. And so there's something about him that gets me excited. And any coach knows this. It's team dynamics. It's why kids might get their best times on relays versus the individual sport. It's the community of it. It's other people believing in you in that moment. And that there's nothing like a teacher who believes in their child's future. And the best part is when the kid knows it. It doesn't count if the kid doesn't know it. If the kid knows that you believe in their future, that's how they borrow hope from you, because you believe in me, then maybe there's something here because I respect you. That's a beautiful thing.
It is. And here's how I've applied it. And these are your words, all the credit to you. Hopeless students can borrow hope from hopeful teachers. Mm-hmm. Hopeless teachers can borrow hope from hopeful leaders. Mm-hmm. There you go, leaders. That's where it is. Only if you have it to spare, though. So we have to cultivate it again, right? It's a mindset and it's a skill. This is a lot. I know our listeners are probably going to need to go back to the beginning and listen to it on their commute on the way home, in addition to their way to school. Jamie, thank you so much. You've reminded us, first of all, that hope is a skill we can practice, and more powerfully, perhaps, that it's a gift we can give to our staff and our students. And so I love that you shifted this conversation away from wishful thinking and to actionable agency. And I really believe that every listener today feels a little more equipped to go back in their building, find those hope builders. So Jamie, thank you. And listeners, if you're like, give me more to learn about Jamie's work, please check out the links in the show notes. And Jamie, where can they find you? Is there if somebody needs you to come and work with Hope, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so best way is through my email address, j-meade, MEADE, @outlook.com. j-meade @outlook.com. That's the best way. I'm also on LinkedIn. I think you put the link in your show notes. Yep. So it'd be great. And just even a conversation would be great, just to point you toward resources or any of the research we've talked about. Happy to do that.
Right. Yes. And if you need a speaker, if you need an inspiring speaker for your group, call Jamie. She can do exactly what you need. And so thank you to our listeners. Thank you to Jamie. And let's all go out and drop some hope-filled nuggets into our own communities this week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.